Welcome, everyone. This is Denise Solzbach. I am the Deputy Director of the National TA Network and Director of the National Center at the Institute for Innovation and Implementation at the University of Maryland, Baltimore School of Social Work. I'm here today with our colleagues from FREDLA and other family organization leadership, and welcome to everyone for this special series on business of family-run organizations, and this discussion is specifically on budgets and cash flow. This exciting four-part series is part of our Managing Now for a Better Tomorrow conversation. We do hope this conversation finds you safe and healthy and well today. We recognize this is a challenging time, particularly for all of us in children's services across the country, and most certainly the families and youth that we serve. We've created these conversations to create peer-to-peer opportunities for you to talk with the presenters as well as one another. We encourage you to use the chat box, and I see you're doing that and you're very good at this, so keep it going. We want you to share your resources with one another, engage with our panelists, and truly have a conversation. You will see that this is very much a conversation, and that's similar to many of you. Our presenters are joining us from their homes, because that's the way we're managing now for a better tomorrow. And it's important to remember, and again, thank you for your participation, because together we are truly stronger in creating forward-looking solutions to meet the challenges of today. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to our colleagues at FREDLA, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. Welcome to FREDLA's series titled The Business of Family-Run Organizations. We're really excited that you join us today. We have so many participants on the line, and we're just delighted at the response we got to this series. So we welcome all of the executive directors, office managers, program directors, board members, anybody who has joined us. Please continue to use the chat box for any questions you have throughout the presentation. We'll be sure to get those answers for you during the course of the webinar. If we run out of time, we'll make sure that you get the answers afterwards. So this is the first in a series of 4 webinars over the next month on topics focused on business operations of family-run organizations. As family-run organizations, we must operate as businesses, but often the passion, and I would say the enormity of our work takes precedence over the business operations. So for the next few weeks, FREDLA is offering a series of webinars focused on topics related to running a small business. Could you advance the slides, Nicole? Thank you. Again. You can advance them again. Thank you. These are great resources, so make sure that you save this website so that you can either sign up for future conversations or to review conversations that have happened in the past. Next slide. And next slide. So my name is Pat Hunt. I'm the Executive Director of FREDLA. And I really want to thank Jane Walker, who's unable to be here today, who's really worked hard to pull these resources together and to make this business series available to all of us. And Jane is our senior advisor at the Family Run Executive Director Leadership Association. We're delighted with this piece of work. We heard from you. This is what you need. You need to continue to send us your ideas about what you need so we can continue to support you. And we're a partner in the National Technical Assistance Network, operated by and coordinated through the University of Maryland. We're grateful to the TA Network for hosting this webinar, and to Sarah Warner, who is part of the tech team at the university, who continues to work her magic to get all of us connected across the country. Thank you, Sarah. Next slide. For those not familiar with FREDLA or to these calls, FREDLA is a network of family-run organizations, all started by families caring for a child or young adult with mental health or behavioral health needs. FREDLA's mission is to build leadership and organizational capacity of family-run organizations, promote their value, and influence policy for our children and families. We collaborate with both state and national organizations and offer technical assistance to family-run organizations, states, and other stakeholders. Next. Our topic of budgeting and cash flow is timely for several reasons, which I suspect probably lends to the number of people who registered for today. Many nonprofits start their fiscal years on July 1st, and so the budgeting begins, long before then. Definitely needs to be getting finalized by June, and contracts are often renewed at this time of year. In particular, this year, budgeting may be more challenging due to the pandemic. Family organizations may have had fewer families coming to them, and if they bill Medicaid for those services, revenue may be down. Additionally, many states are freezing or cutting their budgets due to greater expenses resulting from COVID, and also less revenue as a result of businesses shutting down. Some of our family organizations may be vulnerable to these budget cuts. Some may have applied for payroll protection loans through the Small Business Association and have to budget to use those funds first. So the topic of budgets and cash flow could not be more relevant than at this time. We're very pleased to have with us Karen Dojan, who's a CPA and partner with the firm, and she's going to make sure I say this right, of Weyrich, Cronin and Sorra, and Nicole DeJarnette, who's a CPA and manager at the same firm. And FREDLA has worked with both Karen and Nicole for several years, and they've agreed to provide this webinar pro bono for FREDLA and our network of family organizations. So I just want to say a huge thank you to you and turn this over to you, Karen, as you move to the next slide, Nicole. Thank you.
So good afternoon, good morning, depending on what part of the country you're in. It's awesome to have all of you joining us today. I have to tell you that this is a first for me. I've done presentations before, but I have never done them virtually or via Skype or anything like that. So please bear with me. I am not always the most technically proficient person there is. So I am doubly thankful to Sarah for all the help and assistance that she's been giving us today. Nicole, you may want to bump through a couple other slides. Our biographies are on there, and I think that we've already explained that to you. WCS is a firm located in Maryland. We have 3 offices in the state, but we do work with organizations throughout the country. Nicole and I are both very involved in not-for-profit accounting and auditing. So when we were given the opportunity by FREDLA to present this course, we were ecstatic because it's just part of the work that we do to reach out into the community. So our agenda today, we're going to be talking about just the basics of budgeting. I'm sure that everyone has some type of experience with a budget, even if it goes down to your own family finances. We all have to figure out how we're going to pay the mortgage, the rent, put food on the table, gasoline in a car, clothing for our children. So we all kind of have done that in the past. But now when we're talking about an organization, it gets a little different. You're not only looking at the short term, you're looking at the long term. So budgeting's probably a great topic for everyone, especially in these uncertain times. So once we go over the basics of what a budget is, we're going to look at how this can help you enhance your internal controls, the different types of budgets that you can have, how you're going to figure out your policies and procedures around making these budgets, the limitations that a budget might have, and then also look at some of the cash flow aspects, because in the long run, a budget is nothing more than a plan on how you are going to manage your cash flow over the time period. So why are we here today? And this is typically where I would be asking you to raise your hands and give me a good idea about why you're here and what you want to get out of this course. Not exactly something that we can do at this point in time based on the way that we're presenting this program. So I'm going to tell you why I think you should be here today. Okay, so many of you became executive directors just based on your love for the programs. You were involved in whatever the mission is of your organization, and you've either worked your way up the ranks, or maybe you're someone who is just starting this as a grassroots organization around your kitchen table with maybe only a couple of friends, but you know that you're passionate about what you want to do and what you want to achieve. There aren't too many executive directors who became executive directors because they were really great with numbers and budgets and finances. However, the executive director is responsible for developing and maintaining a business model that not only has mission impact, but it's also going to provide sustained financial health for the organization so that your mission can be accomplished. And that's kind of something that people don't always think about when they become executive directors. But financial leadership is really the key to building that sustainability of your organization or any not-for-profit. And a lot of that financial leadership, it starts with your budget. So why is it important to create and monitor a budget in your cash flows? Well, like I said, it's part of that financial leadership piece. It's also a way that you can align your core values, your core activities for a short-term or a long-term period to make sure that your mission is accomplished over the years. The other thing that you want to look at is that you need to look at that net financial result. And it's going to be based on the best available information that you have at any one particular time. Nicole? Oh, next slide. Okay. So why are you going to create and monitor your budget? It gives you a mechanism for measuring your financial outcomes. It's a key for planning and monitoring what happens in the future. It enhances your internal controls over your spending, over your revenue sources, and then also gives you a mechanism that allows you to monitor your cash that's available for your ongoing needs. Nicole, would you like to take it from here with some budget basics?
Thank you, Karen, and good afternoon, everyone. Good morning. I want to start us off first. I'll start us off first with some high-level.
Sorry, we're having some technical difficulties. Try now.
All right. I want to start us off first with some high-level concepts before we dive down into the nitty-gritty of preparing the budget.
I had it on mute versus unmute. So yeah.
Okay, then just miss. Okay.
So let me start with
a fairly basic question. What is the budget?
A budget
is simply a defined financial plan for a specified period, which is often your one operating year. Another way to think of your budget is a defined action plan as laid out in detail. But if we're going to take the time to make a budget, we want to make sure that it's a good budget. And what is going to differentiate an okay budget from a good budget? Well, there's several ideas. First, the best budgets are the ones that are going to align with your organization's strategic plan. They should be thought of as a tool for your management for future operations and to monitor your current activities. It's important that your budget be well planned out, that it allows for flexibility, but it ultimately is realistic. We sometimes see organizations taking the prior year budget and just rolling into the next year with maybe a few minor tweaks, but not really considering the facts and circumstances that may have changed from one year to the next. None of us can be 100% sure what the future is going to bring. None of us would have predicted this pandemic was going to come down this year. So the best budget is going to allow for some flexibility so that you can, monitor and react to those changes as they come along, while allowing you the leeway to be able to bend and, In order to be successful as an organization, communication between all levels is key. This is also true for your budget process. All levels of the organization need to buy in and be a part of making that budget. The budget is not a one and done item. Once you've established this budget, it needs to be monitored periodically against those actual results. Those variations should be investigated. However, a budget is not an end-all, be-all for the financial management of your organization, and it does have some limitations. It's important not to establish a mentality of use it or lose it, where your staff people feel that they need to expend every dollar in that budget line, because if they don't, next year they're not going to get those dollars, and maybe they need them more next year. It's also important not to make the budget too rigid, where the organization can't make changes when something unusual comes up, or even in a worst case scenario, feels pressure to manipulate how they're charging things because they've hit that budget cap for the year. Ultimately, that budget is not a substitute for your management. So what types of budgets are there? We typically think of two different types of budget. The operating budget is probably one most of us are familiar with. Your annual revenues you expect to come in, those expenses you think to go out. This budget may be done on a couple different levels depending on your organization. Perhaps you work on multiple different grants, and so you need to budget based on what's in those grants. Or maybe you're running different programs, and so each program has its own budget. But there's also a second type of budget, and that would be your capital budget, which would be a more long-term focus of a budget over a period of years. And again, this may depend on your organization. Perhaps you are looking to build a new facility, and now you need to plan out for the next 5 years how you're going to raise those funds, how you're going to maintain that new asset. Some other specific characteristics of a budget is that it's going to be in your monetary unit. For most of us, that's going to be US dollars. It also will involve your method of accounting, which could be perhaps a cash basis for some small organizations. A larger organization likely is using the accrual basis of accounting. It also is generally for a short-term period operating your one-year cycle. It's important that while creating this budget, you involve all the different levels of your organization, not just your finance director, not just one program manager. Everybody needs to buy in for that budget to be successful. And it also requires that frequent monitoring, and that as things come up, we investigate what is causing these variances. What can we do if we're coming in short on our income projections? And so who monitors this budget? Certainly the finance department as they are working on it. Those program managers who have those nitty-gritty details of the day-to-day of why are we spending more on this? And also the board. You have that ultimate fiduciary responsibility. So you are looking at it from that top level versus those staff people who have those lower level details. Everybody needs to come together for that to be a successful organization. So I'm going to turn it back over to Karen for some of the best practices in actually preparing that budget.
Karen, you're on mute.
Am I better now? Am I on?
You are.
Okay, all right. So let's talk about some of the best practices that we have, starting with the tone at the top. Nicole, you want to?
There. Yeah.
Okay, so building a foundation, the tone at the top. All right, like any organization, your plans and objectives really do start with the leadership at the top, and that's where an executive director and also the board are very important in determining what the budget is. If we can have all the budgets that start from the bottom up, but if there are issues, if there are long-term strategic plans that no one is aware of as they're developing the budget on the ground level, then the budget itself is not going to be very effective. So it's really important to start right from the top with knowing what the long-term objectives and strategies are. The staff can provide information to start establishing the budget, but really the executive director, the CFO, the board ought to be there right from the beginning, determining where everything is going to be headed. Okay. So you also need to know your long-term goals and objectives. So you need to prioritize your program delivery goals, set financial goals, and review strategic plans. I think you went too far. Yeah. Okay. All right. Planning and goals really need to be set. Prioritizing what those goals are. Are you looking to add additional services that you previously did not have? What are the financial goals for the organization? And making sure that everything is part of your strategic plan. One of the things that we talk about is using probability weighting. So there are always going to be things that are unforeseen. So who could have ever predicted a pandemic hitting in 2020 when budgets were being laid out in May and June of 2019? However, there are some things so that would be something that was very unusual and you wouldn't know what to do with that, and it's going to kind of hit you blindsided. But there are plenty of things that happen year over year that really should be a part of your budgeting plan. We always know that even though you have equipment, there's always going to be some breakdowns in equipment, repairs that need to be made. So these are things that you look at and go, what's the highest probability that something will happen, that something will change, that will occur during the year? So those are the type of things that you need to keep in mind. Budgeting, if someone had told me a year ago that they were going to budget for a pandemic, other than maybe the National Institute of Health or CDC, I would have thought, well, why would you do that? That's nothing that you really need to be concerned about. But we are learning now that, you know, that while it didn't have a high probability, guess what? It did happen. Buy-in and decentralization. So even though we have where the budget starts with the long-term strategic plans and the initiatives of the organization, we also need to make sure that you are bringing in the people who are on the ground floor, your grassroots people. Find out whether or not what they see coming up the pike, things that may be changing. Perhaps they understand more some of the programs that are going on, and making sure that they are in there establishing the budget for themselves. So it makes no sense to have a top-down only. You have to have both from the top and from the bottom, where everyone's kind of coming together to make sure that the budget is realistic. People on the ground floor may know what the day-to-day operations require, what the costs are, where money can best be served to serve the public or your constituencies, whereas the tone at the top sets the budget in the broader, bigger scope. You really should be working close with your stakeholders, the people who are actually giving you your grants, and moving from there, not simply just looking at what the long-term strategic plans are. We can make great plans, but if someone can't carry them out, then that's going to be a problem. A lot of times what we hear also is that, well, why isn't finance doing the budget? Finance really is a great person to be coordinating that budget, but then again, they are not the ones who have to live with the budgets that are being established, and also probably don't know exactly what costs are required to make the programs actually tick and run. So training and tools. There are a lot of different online tools and calculators that you can use. You can do a Google search and you will come up with page after page of different budget tools that are out there. There's going to be information about budgets and how you can process them. Some of them are free. There are a few that you have to pay some money for. But for the most part, all these tools are out there and waiting for you, especially from some of the national organizations who also are geared around not-for-profits. But you don't need a fancy tool or anything else. What you really could start your budget with is just simply starting off with an Excel spreadsheet. Use the activity that you already have, look at your current chart of accounts and see what expenditures and how you are categorizing your expenditures during the year. And then from there, utilize that to make your best estimate of who you want to serve during the year, what the individual costs are for each of these services per participant or per recipient of your services. And then from there, work through and determine how you're going to calculate your per person or per client cost. Once the budget has been established and everyone has worked on it, it's a great idea to take that information once it's compiled and then also put it into your accounting software if possible. I know a lot of times QuickBooks allows you to have a budget module, and that budget will import in during the year. That's a great tool when we come to monitoring, to figuring out how you're going to look at that budget and then compare what was the reality versus what was your plan for the year. Now, budgets, like Nicole said, we typically think of an operating budget. And an operating budget is simply one where you are giving a best plan for how you are going to conduct your business during the year. But there are also other kinds of budgets that you have to work on. One is a donor-restricted budget. A lot of times when you are out there and you are putting out grant applications, one of the first things that they ask you, besides how you are going to fulfill your mission for the year, they want to know how you're going to utilize specifically their funds. So that's a donor-restricted budget that you might have. Another is a capital budget. A capital budget may be where you're figuring out what your long-term plans are to finance your capital purchases during the year. We all know that technology and equipment don't last forever. So a capital budget can not only take care of a large building project that you may want to do over the years, but a capital budget can also help you look at what are my expenditures? Do I need to purchase additional vans for my programs? You know, how am I going to finance those going forward in the future? I know that I need to buy equipment to offer my services. If I am giving free eye exams to the homeless, I know I need those, the TITMIS machines, so that I can figure out, you know, where our service people, you know, who needs glasses, what type of glasses. Those things are also capital expenditures that you have to think about. all the way down to mundane things such as if I am going to expand my services and I am going to expand my team, I need new office furniture. I need new computer equipment or additional copy machines. Those are all kinds of things that you need to take into account when you're talking about a capital budget.
Karen, we had a quick question come in, and Bethany asked if you had any ideas about ways that they could modify what you're talking about to support families with building their home budgets or their personal family budgets.
Honestly, a personal family budget is probably going to be the same thing as you would for a business budget. You know, we all have fixed incomes that are coming in. It's not simply seniors who are on retirement that say, I have a fixed income. Most of us as families have a fixed income coming in, and that's where we look at our plans for how are we going to support ourselves. So if you have a family, it would be the same thing at looking at, well, what are my fixed costs? I know that I have, and I hope I'm answering this question for what is being asked for, but, you know, I know that I have rent of X amount of dollars every month. And I know that because I have utilities, I have gas and electric bills, I have a telephone bill, I have, you know, a food budget. And just sitting down and looking at what you believe those resources are going to be coming into the family for a particular time period. And then from there, looking and saying, okay, this is the money that I'm going to need just to sustain myself. And then also looking at different ways that maybe you can add additional revenue sources to your family. You know, something that I did years ago with my children was we used to collect cans, and I would take the kids to the recycling, and that was a way that they had some additional, you know, spending money for themselves. You know, maybe there's other things that you can do on the side, a side job, to try and bring in some additional revenue to your family. So there are just a lot of different things that you can do. That kind of build into a family budget as well. And actually, it's going to play in, I was going to say, it's going to play into the next slide that I was about to go in to, which is about building a budget for long-term sustainability. When we look at this long-term sustainability for a budget, a lot of people like to look at a budget and go, well, you know what? All I need to think about is my 12-month period. I'm doing a budget right now, and this budget's going to be finished, and then you look and say, well, okay, all I need to do is make it to the finishing line. But honestly, a budget isn't about getting to a finish line from one 12-month period to the next 12-month period. Budgets really need to have a focus that is very long-term. So even though you are finished, you know, you may be 6 months into your budget, you should always be doing a rolling 12-month budget. So preparing for that 18-month period after the 12-month period. Once you're into month 6 of your budget, you should be now focusing back to month 12 and month 18 and month 24. One of the things that we think about is surpluses. And I know that having a surplus seems to be a dirty, naughty word when it comes to a not-for-profit. And I think that it comes from the idea that we say, well, I'm a nonprofit. Well, does that mean that you really can't have a profit? What that means, or where the term came from, has to do with not-for-profits not benefiting any one person or individuals or owners. So it's nothing where you're getting a personal benefit. But quite honestly, surpluses are probably the best thing that a not-for-profit can do, because that's going to ensure your long-term sustainability of the organization. Think about what we're constantly going through, or what we're currently going through right now with COVID. there are a lot of organizations who really do live hand to mouth, especially in the nonprofit world during their initial years. As funding comes in, it just as quickly goes back out the door. And a lot of that comes from we want to do as much as we possibly can for the people that we're servicing. But when you think about it, part of servicing your clients and your constituents has to do with making sure that you're there for the long haul. You can't really be there for the long haul unless you have some reserves or a little nest egg set aside for a rainy day, just like we're experiencing now. So a lot of times when you do your budget, one of the first things that you want to do is think about having that surplus so that you either have reserves or you have a way to pay down some debt that you may have incurred during some other lean times. A lot of times we think about a balanced budget, and a balanced budget, there's nobody that ever comes out to exactly zero, even though we show a lot of times our budgets have a zero at the bottom. The real world just doesn't work that way. There's always going to be some unexpected expenditure that you weren't planning on that may cause a shortfall, or you may be lucky enough to get a windfall from, a large donation from a private source that you weren't planning on that can help you, be set aside. Doesn't mean that the minute that dollar comes in the door, you have to go out and spend it right away. There are going to be times, if you've been able to build up a surplus, where you're going to have a deficit budget. And the deficit budget can happen when you are about to expand your programs. That's something else that you're always looking forward to. Like I said, a budget isn't something for a fixed period of time. It really is something that you need to be doing for the long haul and looking what you're going to do in the future. So what kind of financial incomes what kind of financial outcomes do you want to do? Sometimes that's going to be based on what your life cycle of your organization is. The budget for an organization that's been around for 100 years is going to be a little, and has had the opportunity to build up perhaps an endowment or a board designated endowment, is going to be a little bit different than an organization who's only been around for 2 years and really is struggling to get themselves out of the gate and to start planning for the future. So the whole idea here is look for long-term sustainability and be very intentional in what you're doing time over time. Now, once you've set up your plan and you're doing this, the next thing is going to be monitoring. The best laid plans are terrific, but what are you going to do if things change? And that's where monitoring becomes so important. We never know what life is going to bring us, and so that's where we need to see what these plans will bring about. We'll go back to the family budget. Everyone can sit and say, well, I'm only going to spend $100 a week on groceries. However, what happens when there's a pandemic and now suddenly groceries are in short supply and then there's been a large uptick in the costs? So you would need to monitor that and say, well, okay, now I have additional money that needed to be spent on something, or there was an unexpected repair. What can I do to alleviate this disbalance that I have in my budget? So that's where monitoring becomes really important, where you're looking and saying to yourself, this is what's happened, this is what I planned, something unexpected happened, whether it's good or it's bad, what can I do to modify the budget that I have right now? This is something that ideally would happen on a monthly basis, but at a minimum, and especially at that higher level with the board and the executive director, no less than at least on a quarterly basis, you should be comparing that actual to your planned or your projected budget. If funding for whatever reason is decreased, then you can't, if you say, well, gosh, my people are sticking to a budget and they're spending just exactly what we've been telling them to spend, well, that's not going to work if you are losing funding. Or maybe you have some additional funding coming in, and that additional funding is now lending itself that we can expand some services because we've had this. So monitoring can go both ways, both on expenditures that may need to be decreased because funding has decreased, and then also may need to be expanded or can be expanded because funding has increased. Next slide. All right. Nicole?
All right. Okay. All right, so if creating a budget sounds daunting, I'm sure for some of you it probably is. So here's a few other procedures and policies to help make that process less of a pain. First, create some timelines. And depending on your organization, this may be different. If you're a larger organization with multiple individuals that need to get different information to you, you need to set down a date of when are they going to have this for you. If you're only 1 or 2 people, your timelines may be a little looser. Also consider all of the plans and trends that are going forward. Do you want to have new staffing coming in? We need to consider that. What is our goals for the next year? Do we want to increase the number of clients we're serving? Start with the prior year's information. It may not be 100% accurate for the current year, but it'll give you a baseline. Make sure it's written. We can then compare it and put it in a sufficient level of detail so that it can be reviewed by the different program levels, by the higher level, by the board. It then will need to go to either your finance committee or perhaps just your full board to be approved. You also want to make sure that there are policies to make changes to that budget when unexpected situations arise. A few other concepts that we've touched on. Is that revenue a reliable stream? Is it a grant that you know you've kind of got set for a 5-year period? Or is it a revenue that maybe it's coming in, maybe it's a donor, maybe the next year that donor isn't going to be as generous. Maybe they can't be as generous. Maybe the stock market's gone down and now they have less of their available fund to give. Are there fixed costs? The constant costs that Karen mentioned, your rent for an individual or for your organization. Are they variable costs where, depending on the activity you serve, those costs are going to vary with that activity, or they're going to vary, but they don't directly relate to any specific activity. There's also indirect costs that need to be considered that may not be specifically related to any one program or service, but would need to be allocated across the organization, such as your general administrative type costs. And then some in-kind services. Perhaps you get donated space with your local government, or you get individuals who provide professional services that they provide their time. You want to consider those types of revenues as well.
We had a quick question come in, Nicole,
to discuss
and I wondered,
cash flow.
Sorry about that. We had a quick question come in. Do you
Okay.
recommend board approval
Making sure that
of any
everyone can
mid-year
hear me?
budget?
So, okay, just making sure everyone can hear me. So cash flows, we look at that, and that is a really important concept that has to do with budgets. So the budgets really are about your revenues and they're about your expenditures, but you also want to make sure that they actually, the cash flows at the same time period that you need it. So this really is a byproduct of your budget. There are different times when you can look at your budget and say, well, you know, I am planning on getting $500,000 worth of funding during the year. However, if you receive all $500,000 of that funding and it all shows up in May, and you projected to have that beginning on July 1st, and your expenditures are going out fixed and they're going out ratably throughout the year, well, that's where you can have a problem because your cash flow is not aligning with your expenditures. This is something that a lot of organizations struggle with, and especially if you have refundable grants. If you don't have those cash reserves that are sitting and waiting while you wait, 30, 60, maybe 90 days to get your funds. Something that I know a lot of organizations who depend on cash flows from governmental organizations, when the states and local governments suddenly shut down because of COVID, their cash flows kind of dried up. And that's where, perhaps the need for PPP loans came into play, or they had to have reduced services. And this was, really a critical time because a lot of organizations really had strain on them, where right now was when they needed to be out in the community, and yet they didn't have those funds because they were waiting to be reimbursed from a government that also was probably semi-shut down, and they weren't getting the funds as quickly as they needed to. So you need to really look at how that cash flow, it's not just simply a number and looking at the number as it falls into place, one place versus another. You need to look at the timing on that. A lot of times you really want to look at this on a monthly basis just to see where you're going to be 30 to 60 to 90 days out, and look at the timeline as it relates to your budget. One of the things that I know we talk about a lot of times is reserves, and that's a question that I get all of the time from people is, well, what exactly is a great reserve or a best practice in reserves for budgets? One of the things that I like to say, ideally you would have anywhere between 3 to 6 months of expenditures that's held in your reserves, so that if you come across a situation like we're in now, where your funding may be slowing down a little bit, but your expenditures are still going on or actually ramping up, you have something to sustain you. But at a bare minimum, when you are just starting out in your organization, I would say that a bare minimum that you should have in your reserve is enough money to cover at least one payroll. I also noticed that we got a question that came in that had to do about board approval of any mid-year budget adjustments. That's a great question. I think that the board needs to be informed, and a lot of it will depend on what your organization's policies are, who actually approves the budgets. I know the executive directors and the directors of finance typically prepare the budget and take it to the board of directors. I would think that even as you're going through, that would be something that the board would monitor on a quarterly basis whenever you have your board meetings. And yes, if the executive director and the director of finance see that there's either going to be a cash flow issue or there has been an overall change in how the organization is progressing with its mission during the year, whether there's a change in funding source or an unexpected expenditure, that yes, that should be brought to the board's attention immediately. And then yes, the board should be involved in figuring out how this change in circumstances is going to work its way through so that there is sustainability of the organization. I think at this, we are about ready to take any additional questions that anyone may have right now about the budgeting or some of the concepts. This was really kind of a quick overview, and I know it probably didn't get into all the details that every one of you is facing as you're preparing your budget, but Nicole and our contact information is going to be available, and if you would like to reach out to us individually, we are both very happy to answer your questions.
If you have a question for Karen and Nicole, please just type it in the chat box and they will address your questions. If you have anything specific about what Karen or Nicole has covered, or if you have any other questions related to budgets and cash flow, feel free to put them in the chat box. Sue asked a question of whether or not the attendees could have a copy of the slides. Karen.
Yes, that is definitely has been made available to the organization and to FREDLA, and I'm sure that they can hand that out or email those out. And then also there are a couple of other really good articles that are about budgeting and cash flow and about financial leadership as it relates to the executive director and the state of the organization, actually even some tools for how to monitor your budget going forward. So all of that is available, and FREDLA, I'm assuming, is going to be passing that out or providing those.
Yes, and Sarah will also be loading the resources in a moment into the chat box. So
Okay, perfect.
There we go. She's on it. So other questions? Do we have other questions back there we missed? We've still got some.
So I see a question about a percentage that can be set aside in a budget to help build a reserve. So building a reserve really is going to come from those surpluses that really a lot of people tend to think are the dirty little secret about a not-for-profit, you know, that bad word, I've got a surplus. I didn't serve as many people as I wanted to. And that really, every time you look at your budget, you should be setting some money aside. So whether it is, 3%, a lot of times it's going to depend on the size of your organization, and what you really have the ability to do without for just a small time period. Let's go back to a family budget. You may start out small where you save as an individual $10 a week out of your paycheck, but that builds up over time. That's where you can look at what, that percentage might be. It might be as low as 1 or 2%. It might be as high as 10%. As your organization gets older, that surplus, probably once you've got a nice one established, you can drop that down and then you don't have to worry quite as much. You're going to have investment returns that are built onto that nest egg. One thing that I have seen some organizations do is much like a capital campaign where you are asking for specific donations that are going to build up so that you can build a new building or a new facility. Some organizations will actually ask for a capital campaign that is to establish a board-designated endowment. You want to be a little careful that you're not saying it's for a specific purpose, so that you're not penning yourself in, but just saying, we are looking to set aside to begin a surplus that we can sustain the future of the organization. And, take pledges for that over several years that will get somebody started, get you that nest egg.
We've got one more question, Karen, about what tools are available in lieu of Excel for nonprofit budgeting. Hugh mentioned that, they currently use Excel, but they have about 10 linked spreadsheets, and it's getting quite complex, and wondered if you had any suggestions about other tools that are available.
So Quicken has some tools for budgeting, and also QuickBooks, there is a budgeting module. And, you know, it's not part of the basic package. I think you have to get a slightly higher level of QuickBooks than the bare bones to be able to access that. So those are a couple other tools that are out there. There are some budget building modules, and I looked up, and unfortunately I did not write down who they were from. But like I said, a quick Google search will get you some information.
Other questions? Nicole, did you want to go through the rest of your slides so you can share your contact information? Oops. Oh, we'll go back to the resources, maybe. Yep, there you go.
I'm sorry, we're having
doing great.
Technical difficulties again.
We're doing great. And
so anyway, my contact information is Karen D at WCS CPA. You can also reach Nicole. Hers is pretty similar to mine. It's Nicole D at WCSCPA.com. And like I said, we are more than happy to answer any individual questions. If you want to give me an email, I am more than happy to kind of send you some resources about budgeting tools that came in from, looks like it came in from Hugh, asking the question about budgeting tools.
Right. Thank you. Nicole, can you go to the resources slide?
And then other than that, I would just say that we are WCS, and we are here to help you if there's anything else that we can do to help you through the budgeting process, help you with any other questions that you might have about your organization, 990 filing, how to establish a new organization, whatever the case may be. Some of the new accounting pronouncements that have come out have made the financial statements for not-for-profits a little different over the last couple of years. I know that also there is, I also know that there are also some new with revenue recognition. So if you have any questions and how that's going to impact your organization, we're also happy to help you out with those as well.
Thank you. So,
and it looks like everyone's got the resources in the chat box. Again, if you email me, I can also send them to you electronically directly if you're having trouble downloading.
So, sincere thanks to Karen and Nicole and to their firm for their generous support of our work today and the most informative piece of information, most important piece, I think, for all of us, right?
Is there anything else?
And so they've provided additional resources that you have, and they'll be available to you as well in the recorded webinar.
Okay, all right, I do see.
Question?
When you have multiple grants that have very specific items they cover, when do you tackle that consideration while building your budget?
Ooh, good question.
So that's a great question. And that goes back to where we said that there are several different different types of grants that you may have to, or several different types of budgets that you may have to start with. And I would say that those a lot of times are the building blocks for your overall budget. So if you have 3 revenue streams that are coming from directly sourced grants, you would have to put those into your budget because you know that that's a specific funding source and you know exactly what expenditures are going to be covered by that. And then from there, then you take that overall budget and then you can use that to determine what additional funding you're going to need to meet the overall needs. So you're really kind of doing them at the same and coming to the middle. Because if one of your grants is covering some of your program directors, and you know that's part of your overall salary expense, then you would be able to say, okay, well, my program directors are covered for these 3 particular items. Now what else do I need as far as support services for those? And what other programs do I have that perhaps don't have a direct funding source that I'm going to have to get either from fees to participants or actually from funding that's not restricted from individual donors or foundations.
Great. Thank you. Can we move, Nicole, one more slide, maybe?
Slide's been advanced, Pat.
Thank you. I appreciate it. So please be sure to register. You can advance it one more. Thank you. Register for the upcoming webinars in this series. And we think there are some great opportunities here around topics like nonprofit retirement plans, insurances that nonprofits need, and internal controls for small nonprofits. And be sure to register for those. Nicole and Karen, we will see you again on the 23rd of July, it looks like. So thank you very much. I hope that you all have a wonderful afternoon. Don't forget to keep the questions coming if you have them and to stay in touch. Thank you. And
thank you for having us.
Thank you. And thanks so much to the TA Network for hosting the webinar and to all of you for sharing part of your day with us.
Thank you.
You bet. Bye.